His silence is the first thing that stings. Not anger, not pleading, just silence. I walk out and expect the usual. A few calls, maybe a message asking when I'll be back, maybe some sulking when I return. Instead, there's nothing. Not that night, not the next morning, not even a good night. Friday, I left in heels and perfume. Saturday, I woke up next to someone whose bed smelled like cedar and cheap Victory. By Sunday, I was back in our house and the air was wrong. Not dramatic, just wrong. The lights were on, but something had gone dim underneath it all. The table was still half set, 2 plates, candles unlit, a knife laid too neatly across his napkin, like he'd set it down mid-thought and never came back. I slipped my shoes off by the door and walked into a home that felt paused. He was in the garage, tightening something under the hood of his truck. Hoodie sleeves pushed up, wedding band still on. He glanced up once, said nothing, went back to work like I was the neighbor's noise. I hovered at the kitchen counter for a few minutes waiting for him to follow. He didn't. That night, I opened our banking app to book a facial for the following weekend. Declined. Confused, I checked again. The shared account was grayed out. My name was still there, but access was restricted. I tried the calendar next. Empty, not wiped clean, just gone. Like we'd never had appointments, plans, vacations. If you're still listening and any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe. Most people just listen in silence, but that one click tells the team these stories matter. By Monday, I was watching him move through the house like I'd been demoted to background noise. He was polite, distant, efficient. He made coffee and brought me a cup. No cream, just how I hated it. When I mentioned it, he raised a brow. "Oh," he said flatly, "I must have remembered wrong." The words didn't sting. It was the way he walked out of the room before I could respond. That absence of effort, of even pretending to care. I followed him into the living room later, tried to ask if he wanted to talk. He was on his laptop. Password protected now. "Do you want to maybe clear the air?" I asked, folding my arms. He looked up, blinked once. "About what?" "You know what?" His gaze lingered a second too long. Then he said, "I don't think I do," and went back to typing. That's when I noticed it. Something new. A quiet kind of confidence. His shoulders weren't slumped. His jaw wasn't tight. This wasn't passive aggression. This was retreat, but not the kind that gives up, the kind that waits. He wasn't chasing. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't playing at all. The next morning, I left for work early, needed the routine, the normalcy, checked my phone in the elevator, still no messages from him, but in my texts, just beneath the ones from coworkers, was the one I sent that Friday before I left. He has no idea. This'll be fun. My stomach turned. I didn't even remember sending it. I tapped it open and reread it twice, then scrolled up. There it was, his name at the top. He was still in the chat when I typed it. He saw it. Back home that evening, the house smelled like wood polish and restraint. He'd cooked dinner. Not for both of us, just a single plate at the end of the counter. Steak, asparagus, a folded napkin beside a glass of whiskey. He didn't look up when I walked in, just kept reading. "You're really not going to talk to me?" I asked. "I'm busy." "You said everything changes. What does that even mean?" He finally looked up. "It means I stopped assuming I mattered to you, so I stopped acting like I did." I stood there in silence, the kind that closes a door tighter than any slam ever could. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He didn't ask where I'd gone that night or who I'd been with. He already knew, and worse, he didn't care the way I expected. I walked upstairs alone, turned on the light in our bedroom. His side of the closet was untouched, but a duffel bag sat at the foot of the bed, unzipped, half full, the kind of bag you pack not when you're running, but when you're ready for whatever comes next. I stared at it for a long time, listening to the steady quiet of a man who no longer needed to be heard, and I realized he didn't slam the door. He just let it close behind me, and that was enough. Sunday morning, I came downstairs to the smell of eggs and toast. He was already at the stove, moving like a man on a schedule. Calm, deliberate. Coffee brewed, plate set, butter soft in his dish. For a second, I thought maybe we were okay. "Morning," I said cautiously, slipping onto one of the stools. "Morning," he replied, without looking up. No tension in his voice, but no warmth either. Just a flat, even note that landed with more weight than shouting ever could. We ate in near silence. I waited for a question, where I'd been, who I'd seen. Nothing. He offered the last piece of toast. I declined. He took it without hesitation. After breakfast, he stood, wiped his hands, and walked out to the garage. I stayed at the table, listening. No music, no TV, just the soft clink of tools. He stayed out there for hours. When I finally peeked out, he was under the hood of the truck, sleeves pushed back again, headphones in. I watched him for a moment, solid, quiet, controlled. Then I walked away. It felt like interrupting something I no longer had access to. That night, I tried booking a hotel for a friend's bachelorette next month. The card declined again. I checked our banking app. Everything tied to the joint account was frozen. I refreshed, tried the backup. Same. I checked the calendar. Blank. I went to grab the laptop, the one he always left open on the side desk, with the password I'd known for years. Now it prompted me. 3 wrong tries later, I gave up. I sent him a text from upstairs. Are you mad? No answer. 10 minutes later, I crept downstairs. His phone lit up when I passed the kitchen. My message was still unread. He was back in the garage. I peeked in. He was at the workbench now, a small USB in his hand, slotting it into a drive, copying files in total silence. Then he opened the safe in the corner, one I never cared much about, and placed the drive inside like it was the end of a task he'd been planning for months. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched through the small crack in the door. When he finally locked the safe and turned, I stepped back into the hallway, heart hammering like I was the one hiding something. I slipped into the bathroom, closed the door, stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked tired, flushed. This wasn't the man I married. No, correction, this was the man I married. I just never paid attention to this side of him. That quiet was never passive. It was preparation. He was calculating, not cruel. But there was a chill in his restraint now that made me feel like I was standing outside our life, looking in. I came home late again the next night, wine with friends. I expected a question, a look, some hint of suspicion. Instead, he nodded from the couch, watching a documentary with his reading glasses halfway down his nose, like I'd just come back from the store, like my absence didn't even register as unusual. Everything okay? I asked. He muted the TV, turned to me. Why wouldn't it be? I opened my mouth, closed it. Nothing came out. He clicked the volume back on. Upstairs, I opened the drawer where we kept passports and old tax returns. It was organized to an inch of its life, everything labeled, time-stamped, legal pads stacked in order, but one folder was gone, our insurance. I stood there for a long time, hands still in the drawer, like the answer might jump out if I stared long enough. This wasn't retreat. This was repositioning. The scariest part? He hadn't yelled. He hadn't slammed a door or packed a bag. He was still here, but everything about him said, "You're no longer invited." I didn't notice the silence becoming a cost until it hit the card reader. The spa package was already booked. 2 nights, full massage, salt soak, the works. I stood at the front desk in my robe, trying to relax while a smiling receptionist typed my last name again. "I'm sorry, ma'am," and was still declining. I pulled out a second card, one I hadn't used in months. Same result. The smile on the receptionist's face thinned. I felt the flush rise in my chest. "I'll sort it," I muttered, stepping aside, thumbing through my phone. Our joint account was locked down. The backup? Depleted. I stared at the numbers, trying to make sense of how it had shifted so fast. There'd been plenty. Now, not enough. That night I drank wine from the mini fridge and scrolled through texts, waiting for him to message. The coworker. I'd send a casual, "Hey, got here safe 4 hours earlier." No reply. I opened the thread. His last few messages were shorter than usual. No emojis, just cool and NP. The usual playfulness was missing, like he'd seen too much too soon and was already pulling away. I tossed the phone on the bed. When I got home, the first envelope waiting was from the insurance company. Policy lapsed. I flipped the page. Apparently, he'd removed himself from the account. I didn't even know he could do that without me. Turns out, he'd been listed as the primary all along. I called my sister that afternoon, pacing the kitchen. "He's acting weird," I said. "Like, Cold, not angry, just switched off. So it's passive-aggressive. She was quiet for a beat then, or maybe just done. Her words sat on me like wet wool. He made me coffee last week, I said, with the wrong creamer. And he knows I hate hazelnut. He did it on purpose. Or maybe he just stopped keeping track of your preferences. I didn't say anything. I ended the call early, blaming a work meeting that didn't exist. That evening, I walked past him in the living room. He was rinsing a glass. Just one. Always one now. He didn't even ask if I wanted something. You could talk to me, you know, I snapped. He turned, eyes calm. About what? About how you're acting. About freezing the account. About whatever this is. He wiped the glass, placed it on the rack. You'll figure it out, he said, then walked past me. Not hostile, not dismissive, just gone, in plain sight. I stood there fuming, my hands curled around the counter's edge. I wanted him to fight back, to argue, to yell, but he just left me alone with my own noise. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how many times I'd brushed him off over the years with "not now," or "I'm tired," or "you wouldn't get it." How many things he'd stopped sharing before I even noticed. I heard his footsteps in the hallway just past midnight, not toward me, away, downstairs, the click of the garage door, a soft engine hum. He wasn't going anywhere, he just didn't want to be here. The next morning I tried texting him something light, some throwback joke we used to laugh about. No response. I checked again at lunch. Still nothing. Later that day, I lost it over the trash. It sounds ridiculous now, but that's what did it. He didn't take it out. It was full, overflowing, a banana peel on top. Seriously, I barked when he came in from the yard. You walked past it 5 times. He glanced at the can, then at me. You saw it too. That's not the point. It is now. And he walked away again. I stood there, hands shaking, yelling after him, but he was already halfway up the stairs. I threw the trash bag against the door, something pathetic in the way it landed, and slumped to the floor. He wasn't punishing me. He was living like I wasn't there. And that was worse. I thought I knew what he did. Compliance, risk management, something with policies and reports, paper pushing basically. He'd leave early, come home late, not because he had to, but because he was meticulous. Quiet men with quiet jobs. That's how I'd filed it away, how I'd filed him away. Until the morning I went digging. It started with something small. I was trying to pull up our tax returns to send to the bank. The shared drive we used for years, the one bookmarked on both our laptops, was empty. Not locked, not wiped, just gone. One file remained. A single document titled Statement of Intent. I clicked it. At the top, his name, a logo I didn't recognize, and a tagline that felt surgical: strategic continuity, legal integrity, operational defense. Below that, pages of business registrations, contract excerpts, and clients. My stomach tightened as I read names I knew. Big ones, national ones, 2 global finance firms, a federal agency I'd only ever seen mentioned in headlines, and at the bottom, a number, year-to-date revenue, mid-6 figures. I just sat there. He'd had this LLC for 19 months, while I'd been teasing him for being boring. While I joked to friends that he'd peak at retirement, he was apparently building something behind a wall of silence. When did he find time? When did it all begin? That night I waited for him to bring it up. He didn't. We ate in silence again. He read for a while, then went to bed early. No questions, no conversation. Like the gap between us wasn't worth bridging anymore. A week later, I found the video. I wasn't even searching for him. I was watching a segment on corporate fraud, and a name caught my eye. His last name. Same spelling, same calm voice. The title at the bottom of the screen: Dale Wexler, former strategic risk advisor, Federal Oversight Panel. There he was, standing at a podium in D.C., Navy suit, controlled tone, eyes sharp, talking about systemic vulnerability in institutional finance like it was weather math. People in the audience took notes. One woman leaned in like he was giving away the blueprint to the world. He moved like someone who belonged. I pressed pause, rewound, Watched again. He had never mentioned this, not once. I always assumed if he was doing something like this, I'd know. That he'd come home and brag a little, but he hadn't. He hadn't needed me to validate it. He hadn't needed anything from me, it seemed. And that was what burned. I walked downstairs with the laptop still open, set it on the counter while he poured himself a glass of water. You worked for the federal government? He didn't look up. In a consulting capacity. How long? He finally met my eyes. Does it matter now? You said you worked in compliance. I did. You just never asked what kind. I stared at him, hoping he'd crack a little. Maybe smile, maybe say he was kidding, exaggerating. But he just took a sip of water, rinsed the glass, and left it in the rack. One glass, always one. I went back to the laptop, clicked deeper into the video. His tone was different, more forceful. Not cold, but assured. He laid out a case study, referenced legislation I couldn't spell, quoted risk thresholds like poetry. I thought about all the times I'd rolled my eyes when he brought up redundancies and layers of security. All the times I told him to stop overthinking everything, that his world didn't need to bleed into mine. Turns out I'd been bleeding into his, quietly, irreversibly. I looked around our house at the furniture we bought on discount, the things we never upgraded because he was saving. I used to tease him that he was preparing for a zombie apocalypse with how much he squirreled away. Now I wasn't sure if I was living with a doomsday prepper or a man who'd simply stopped letting me into his actual life a long time ago. He came back in to grab his phone, glanced at the video on the screen. You never noticed, he said softly. Not angry, not smug, just stating a fact. Then he walked out the door. No slam. Just the same quiet click I'd left behind the night I wore that red dress. Only difference, I came back thinking I still had the upper hand, and now I wasn't so sure who was standing above whom. I waited longer than I should have, pride maybe, or denial. But by the time I picked up the phone and called an attorney, the silence around me wasn't just emotional, it was financial, legal, structural. Something in the bones of our life had shifted. I just hadn't realized yet how deep the cracks ran. The lawyer was polite, older, deliberate. I explained the situation quickly, my voice steadier than I felt. My husband and I are going through something, and we've been married 18 years. The house is in both our names. I just need to know where I stand. If we separate. There was a pause on the other end. Then, let me pull the records. Clicking. Keys. I pictured him sitting in a dark office, glasses sliding down his nose. Another pause. Actually, he said slowly, the deed was transferred 16 months ago. Transferred to what? A trust, an irrevocable trust. The quitclaim deed removed your name from the title. That's not possible, I said. I never signed anything like that. You did. I'd remember. You signed it during a refinancing process. Does that ring a bell? I blinked. My stomach turned over. He had asked me to sign a few papers, something about getting a better rate before interest went up. I barely glanced at them. We were in the kitchen and I was late for work. I signed and left. He'd even made me coffee that morning. Can you send me a copy? I asked, already in your inbox. I opened the file the moment it landed. There it was, my full signature dated and witnessed. The language was clear, firm. The house was no longer co-owned. The trust listed him as the grantor. The beneficiary was no one I recognized, but it wasn't me. I put the phone on speaker and paced the room. I didn't know what I was signing. I said, doesn't that count for something? It depends. Was there duress? Forgery? No, he said it was about the mortgage. That'll be difficult to contest. I sat down on the edge of the couch. The same couch we bought with our first tax return, the same one we laughed on, cried on, planned futures on. I stared at the armrest like it could still hold the outline of who we used to be. What about my car? I asked suddenly. It's in my name, right? More clicking. It was, but it was folded into a company asset pool 6 months ago. What company? He told me. It was the LLC I'd seen in the statement of intent. The one he'd been building in silence for over a year and a half. You mean he owns it now? Technically, the LLC does, and the LLC is him. A pause. Yes. I hung up and sat still for a long time, not crying, not even shaking, just still. like the moment after an accident when your brain hasn't caught up to your body yet. I looked around the room, trying to make sense of the world I thought I lived in. He'd planned it all. Not out of spite, not in a frenzy. Like a man laying kindling under a house, one stick at a time, waiting until the wind was right. The worst part? I'd handed him the match, my signatures, my indifference, my blind trust. He didn't hide the papers. He didn't forge anything. He just presented them at the right moment, in the right way, with the right expression. And I signed, because I thought I knew him, because I thought I was safe. Later that night, I sat at the dining table with a pen and a notepad, listing every account, every asset, every shared login I could remember. So many of them were no longer shared. I looked at our wedding photo still hanging on the wall. He hadn't touched it, hadn't ripped it down or broken the frame. He didn't need to. He'd already taken the house out from under it, and suddenly I understood. I hadn't been outwitted in some dramatic legal ambush. I'd simply been outpaced by a man who used paperwork like wire, looped quietly around every piece of ground I thought was mine. I didn't plan on crying in a lobby, but there I was, knees crossed, hands folded tightly in my lap, blinking too much, pretending to read a year-old issue of Forbes while the receptionist ignored me like it was policy. I'd driven to his office because I couldn't take the silence anymore, not the financial separation, not the missing documents, not the lawyer's quiet phrases like irrevocable and no longer contestable. I needed to see him. I needed to look into his face and find some trace of the man who used to hold my hand in elevators and whisper, "We're fine," during the storms. But I never made it past the desk. "He's in meetings all day," the woman said, with a voice so neutral it almost sounded fake. "I'm his wife," I said, trying to sound calm, casual, like I belonged. She didn't flinch. He gave no exceptions. So I sat, for 20 minutes, then 30, just waiting. Behind her, a large screen looped muted news segments, finance, policy, tech headlines. At first, I wasn't watching. Then his name caught my eye. Top line, white text on a deep blue background. Dale Wexler to lead private risk roundtable. The photo next to it made my heart stop. Him in a tailored navy suit. Tie perfect, posture composed, chin tilted slightly up. That same clarity in his eyes I'd seen years ago, back when he proposed with shaking hands and a speech I never let him finish. He looked inevitable. The news crawl continued. Someone passed by and nodded toward the screen. "Solid pick," they murmured to the receptionist. She smiled. "Yeah, he doesn't miss." I didn't know what hurt more, hearing someone else say that or realizing how true it was. I left before lunch, walked out without another word, drove in circles for an hour, then parked in front of our house, just staring at the front door. The porch light was still on from the night before, one of those little things he used to remind me about. I never listened. That night, I left him a voicemail. I tried not to sound broken, tried to keep my voice steady. "I miss who we used to be," I said. "I miss you." I waited after that, for hours. Kept my phone nearby while I made tea, cleaned the dishes, folded laundry that didn't need folding. Nothing came, not a call, not a single word. In the morning, I woke up with a tightness in my chest I couldn't name. It wasn't grief, it wasn't rage, it was absence. I pulled open the closet, reaching for one of his hoodies, an old habit when I felt unsteady. Half the hangers were empty, not chaotic, not rushed, just gone. His favorite shirts, his jackets, the cufflinks I gave him on our 10th anniversary, even the small overnight bag we used for weekend trips, all missing. The drawers were closed but lighter, the kind of light that tells you something's over. I stood there a while, breathing shallowly, until I noticed something under the pillow. A folded sheet of heavy paper, cream stock, his handwriting. Careful, steady. You walked out. I walked forward. That was it. No flourish, no accusations, no goodbye. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching it with both hands like it might vanish if I let go. The curtain had fallen, not with noise, but with finality. A slow drip of candle wax sealing the edges of a chapter I thought I could keep open just a little longer. But he had already stepped off stage, and I was still clinging to a script he no longer wanted to read. It came on a Thursday, a plain envelope, no return address, No handwriting, just left in the mailbox between a credit card offer and a flyer for roof repair. I didn't think twice when I tore it open, until the small black USB fell into my hand. No note, no label, just that cold plastic weight. I stared at it for a long time, thumb running over the edge. I almost threw it out. Almost. But curiosity's a cruel thing when you've already lost everything else. I plugged it in upstairs, my laptop humming to life like it knew this would hurt. Inside, a single folder, no title, just timestamps. Dozens of them. They were all audio files. And then I saw the metadata. Source, my old phone, the one I had before the upgrade, the one that used to sync automatically to our shared cloud account. I'd forgotten it did that. I never thought to unsync it, never thought he'd remember it existed. I clicked the first clip. My own voice, bright and biting. He's just so boring, like God. Everything's a checklist with him. I could scream. Laughter in the background. Friends, wine glasses clinking. He still irons his t-shirts. Who does that? It's like being married to a filing cabinet with feelings. The clip ended. Next one. No, listen. He scheduled our last date night on the shared calendar. Like, did he send himself an Outlook invite too? More laughter. My voice sharper this time. I remembered that night. I'd had 2 glasses of red and a head full of misplaced entitlement. I thought I was being funny. I thought I was being real. Another clip. This time I was on the phone with my sister. No, he's not dangerous. He's not even dramatic enough to have an affair. He's just safe, like a paperweight. He'll never leave. He needs me more than I need him. Silence fell in the room as I stared at the screen. My breath caught in my throat. I kept listening. Clip after clip. Different days, different moods, but the same tone, dismissive, arrogant, unseeing. I had mocked his routines, rolled my eyes at his consistency, laughed about how invisible he was in rooms full of louder people. I thought he didn't notice. I was wrong. The final file sat at the bottom of the folder. No timestamp. Just a title. Stone. I clicked it, heart hammering, his voice steady, calm. No malice, no tremor. You told everyone I was a stone. You said it like it made me small, like being steady was a weakness, but stones don't beg. Stones don't chase, they wait, they absorb, and when the water stops, they're still there, heavier than before. Silence, then the file ended. I sat perfectly still, mouth dry, laptop screen glowing in the dark like a witness to my own undoing. He'd heard everything. He hadn't reacted, hadn't confronted, hadn't yelled or demanded apologies. He'd just listened, absorbed, and waited. That night I lay in bed clutching the USB like it might burn through my skin. I didn't cry, not at first, just stared at the ceiling, heart thudding against the weight of my own words. The damage wasn't new. It had just finally echoed, and now there was no one left to unhear it. I read the message 3 times, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. You just seemed more grounded when you were still with him, stable. I think I got caught up in something that wasn't mine to ruin. Sorry. That was it. From the same man who had once whispered how different I was, how I deserved more, how my husband didn't see me, and now he was done. Tidy exit. No follow-up. I stared at the blue bubbles on my screen, heart numb. Outside, the wind knocked a loose branch against the side of the house. I used to tell Dale to fix that. He always did. I didn't know how. I set the phone down and walked into the kitchen, trying to occupy my hands with something, anything, but the moment I stepped through the doorway, I froze. The table was empty, not just cleared, empty. No placemats, no coasters, no salt shaker in the center. The chairs felt arranged by a stranger, too far from the table, angled slightly wrong. One corner of the rug was curled. I stared at it like a crack in the foundation. I hadn't noticed how much of him lived in the quiet upkeep. I hadn't noticed anything, really. 18 years in the same house. I'd learned how he liked his coffee, how he folded towels, how he arranged the pillows on the couch. But I'd never once asked what he needed, what scared him, what made him feel safe. He always asked me, even when I brushed it off. Now the house felt bigger. Not in a good way, like a shell with echoes. The fridge hummed too loud. The floorboards creaked in unfamiliar spots. The air felt thinner upstairs, like it had turned on me. The heater made a clicking sound every hour. The pilot light was inconsistent. I Googled the model, found nothing helpful, and sat there with a jacket on instead. The next mortgage bill came in my name. The auto draft failed. I hadn't realized he'd been paying the full amount himself for months, quietly, without a word, just carrying it. I checked the yard from the bedroom window. Overgrown, the grass uneven. The roses he used to trim were sagging under their own weight. I'd mocked him once for fussing with them in the rain. "You treat those bushes better than you treat yourself," I'd laughed. He just smiled and said, "Some things grow better when you pay attention." Now they were dying. I called my mother that night, unsure what I wanted to hear. Her voice was soft, cautious. "Sweetheart, maybe you just need time." Time for what? To sit with what's left. She didn't say, "Fix it," didn't suggest calling him, didn't offer hope. Neither did my father. He didn't mention Dale's name at all, and when I brought it up, he changed the subject. My friends, ones who used to laugh with me about how boring he was, had grown quiet too. Less group chats, fewer invites. I saw the shift in their eyes when I tried to joke about how fast things changed. They didn't laugh this time. They saw it. They saw me, and worse, they saw him too, for what he had quietly been all along. The next morning, I walked out barefoot onto the porch. The wood was cold. A few dead leaves skittered across the boards. The wind moved past me like I wasn't there. I looked around the yard, the peeling paint on the fence, the way the porch light flickered. The silence that used to feel like calm now stretched like distance, mile after invisible mile. And for the first time, I knew he hadn't left to punish me. He'd just accepted that I'd never come looking. And by the time I turned around to find him, he'd already gone someplace I didn't know how to reach. It came bundled with the junk mail, a glossy envelope, soft green and gold lettering addressed to me. I nearly tossed it without opening, just another seasonal appeal or alumni update, but something about the weight made me pause. Inside, a trifold newsletter. The front read, "Civic Bridge Initiative, 1-year report." Beneath it, a quote, "When systems are understood, silence becomes strategy." I frowned. I'd never heard of it. I flipped to the second page and stopped cold. There, in bold print near the top, with special thanks to our founding donors, my name, first and last, right beside a figure, $50,000 inaugural grant. My breath caught. That wasn't possible. I scanned the page again. Same name, same spelling. Confused, I pulled out my laptop and searched the organization. First hit, a clean, professional site, deep blue header, understated serif font. Focus, legal literacy and procedural advocacy for men navigating divorce and post-marital litigation, all centered on transparency, dignity, and quiet preparation. There was an About section. I clicked. There, at the top of the page, his name, founder, Dale Wexler. My chest tightened as I stared at the photo, the same one from the news piece, but this time he was seated, sleeves rolled up, mid-conversation with a group of men around a table. They were listening closely. One was taking notes. I scrolled further. A timeline showed key events from the past year. Founding, first class, first successful case supported. Under Q2, initial funding through joint marital assets, finalized under Clause 14 of the Wexler Revocable Trust. Clause 14. I didn't even know there was a Clause 14. I didn't even know he had set up something like this. I dug through old emails, no mention, no trace. The trust had been legal, binding, and invisible to me until now. That money, that had been our money, my money. He'd moved it quietly, methodically, and turned it into something else entirely. I was furious. Furious at the secrecy, the audacity. I clicked on the media tab. There was a video. Just him, against a simple backdrop. No suit this time. Just a dark gray shirt, sleeves cuffed at the wrist, calm, still, every word measured. I was called forgettable, unnoticed. That was my edge. When people think you're harmless, they show you everything. And when they do, you learn the difference between power and noise. Power listens, power waits. He looked into the camera. Not smug, not angry, just certain. I paused it, sat back. My pulse thudded against my ribs. He hadn't just walked away from our marriage. He hadn't just reclaimed his independence, he had built an institution. He had taken everything I'd dismissed, his quiet nature, his methodical habits, his long nights of boring work, and turned it into a platform that would help other men just like him, and I had funded it, unknowingly, passively. Through shared accounts I never bothered to read, through lines I signed without blinking, through trust I didn't earn, I scrolled through the testimonials, names withheld, but the stories all echoed the same. Men who were blindsided, discredited, dismissed, men who had walked away, quietly, only to return with clarity and proof. I had thought I was the smart one, the one in control, the one with options. But he hadn't just moved on. He'd leveraged everything I overlooked and turned it into momentum. Now his voice was speaking for dozens, hundreds maybe, and mine was silent, forgotten, not because he erased me, but because I never mattered as much to him as I assumed I did. And now he was using that assumption, the one I mocked, to change the conversation entirely, one quiet sentence at a time. It came just as the light was starting to change, late afternoon on a Tuesday, when everything in the house felt paused, no knock. Just the sound of the delivery truck pulling away and the soft thud of a box against the porch. I opened the door slowly. A small cardboard package sat at my feet. No sender listed, no markings, except my name printed neatly on the label. Inside, a single object, wrapped in tissue paper, a photo frame. I knew it before I saw it. I knew by the weight of it, the faint scent of old cedar from the frame he'd built himself during one of his quiet winters, our wedding day. The photo was from just after the ceremony. He's standing beside me, wind catching the edge of my veil, his hand steady on my back, and I'm laughing at something out of frame, completely unaware of the way he's looking at me. Not dramatic, not posed, just still, just present. I hadn't seen this photo in years. I turned it over. One line written in his hand, pressed into the backing paper. Some things you don't get to redo. That was all. No name, no date, no return address. He knew I'd recognize the handwriting, knew I'd know what it meant, knew it didn't require anything else. I sat on the floor with it for a long time, not crying, not yet, just listening to the house breathe. It had been months since he walked out of my life without slamming the door. Since he peeled back the layers of silence I thought meant safety and revealed them for what they were, distance I never bridged, distance he eventually stopped hoping I'd cross. I set the frame on the mantel, then moved it to the nightstand. Later that evening, I picked it up again and held it in my lap as the heater rattled in the walls. I didn't stare at it to mourn. I stared at it to wonder. How had I missed the quiet evolution of a man I thought I knew? How had I failed to see that the habits I mocked were actually anchors that while I drifted, he was building? I ran my thumb along the glass, over his face in the photo. Back then, I saw steadiness as something quaint. Now it looked like power I never understood. And the question that lingered long after the sun disappeared behind the overgrown yard and the porch light buzzed to life, how many nights did he spend beside me, quietly waiting for me to notice, before he finally stopped? That was the real ending, not the silence, not the absence, but the realization that there is no version of him left to return to. He didn't vanish. He grew past the threshold of who I was willing to see and left nothing behind that could be reopened.